Everybody, here's the walkthrough video on the tree service pricing calculator. Thanks for downloading this. I'm going to walk you through it now. On a high level, there's a few pieces. Hey everybody, welcome to the walkthrough of the tree service pricing calculator. Thank you for downloading this. I hope that this is going to help you put more profit into your pocket by making sure that your top line sales and revenue builds in your profit and your expenses and your equipment, so you don't have to cover that cost. You can pass it on to the customer appropriately. So on a high level, there's a few pieces to the calculator. As you see, we need to identify our target gross profit. Then we need to work through our crew labor costs. We then need to identify the equipment that we have for that crew and determine its annual and daily costs approximately. After we have that, plus our target desired gross profit margin, we can work backwards to engineer what our daily revenue rate needs to be. What do we need to bill at on a daily rate and on an hourly rate and on a per man rate to make sure we hit that number to incorporate all those costs. After that, we have a little guess and check simulation at the bottom where you can turn this into more of a dynamic calculator where you can play around with the gross profit and some of your expenses and see how it affects your actual profits in your pocket. But in order to do that, we're going to start over from the top, go through the details, and then get to the end over there and talk about how to play with those numbers to engineer your profits. Okay, so jumping back in, over here at the top, we need to identify in the blue cell how much gross profit of every dollar that we sell do we want to be left over after paying the crew and incorporating costs for equipment. How much do we want left over to cover the overhead, right? The day-to-day overhead of the business, and how much do we want left over for profit? So we're going to estimate a number here for illustration purposes that we want 60% of every dollar to be left over for overhead and profits. Then we go down over here to the crew labor section, and you can modify this in the blue to put in your hourly rates. You can delete some of these. You can add some. If you have 3, if you have 6, go ahead, add a row or delete a row. You can feel free to change the names over here if you need to. The goal is to get a total hourly rate for the crew. And then after that, we need to go ahead and punch in what our average daily hours are. Now, that incorporates the time that they're standing around in the shop and at night when they're cleaning up the trucks and drive time and anything in between that we want to make sure that we incorporate that as a cost of doing business to deliver our service, and we could bill for that. Note over here that I have a calculator for overtime because I want to make sure we can get as accurate as possible. So if you plug in something that is above 8, it's going to spit out a number for us to help us take care of that effective overtime. So for example, if we work on average of 10 hours a day, then we have 2 hours of overtime. That is a time and a half is 3 hours. So we have an effective 3 hours that we're going to apply to the hourly rate of $130 an hour. I have an estimated 8% in here for payroll taxes plus a little bit of unemployment. You can adjust that number as needed. Then we have a formula that tells us in here a calculation of what our cost is, incorporating the overtime and the payroll taxes and their drive time and everything that we paid for that worker to come in and do the revenue. Because we had set a desired gross profit up here of 60%, we now have a calculated price target of $3,861. That's working backwards, taking our daily costs as 40% and making sure that we have 60% left over. That means that this is the amount that you need to make sure that you're putting on the calendar daily. That's multiple jobs, that's one job, that's a minimum price to cover your cost of the cruise. Similarly, we're going to look at it the same way for the equipment. Now the equipment, there's many ways to price out your equipment. This is a simple linear way where we just calculate on a piece of equipment that we bought on one day and sold in another year, what was the beginning value, how many years later do we expect to sell it, and what will we sell it for? So if we buy a crane for $250,000 and it's worth $100,000 in 5 years, so over 5 years we used up $150,000 of that crane. That's $30,000 a year over 5 years. So on and so forth for all of the equipment and tools, etc. You can modify the useful life, input your costs, estimate the resale value. The rest over here is going to calculate based off of the inputs. After that, we need to approximate the amount of days that we work on an average annual year, how many days there are. Because then we could break down our annual cost of equipment usage into a daily rate. Once we have that, just like above, we're able to turn that into a minimum price target that we need to bill out at to make sure that that cost of equipment is covered to leave us with 60% gross profit left. Now, if we take the target price for the crew labor, add it to the target price for the equipment, we now have a minimum daily rate that we need to have on the calendar for all the jobs that the crews are going out for to cover themselves and the equipment. Then to take it down more granular, if we can put into here the amount of hours that we bill out at. So the guys might work 10 hours a day, but how many hours are we trying to stuff of labor on the calendar when we go to a job and we bill out, all right, this job is going to be 4 hours plus minus? How many hours of work are we estimating on the calendar? That allows us to break down the price into an hourly crew rate. And then based off of how many workers you have identified above, it tells us how much we need to bill at minimum hourly rate per man. So we've gone through the exercise of setting how much we want profit left over on a gross margin basis from every dollar of sales. We went through our crew labor costs to make sure that we're incorporating as much as possible the time that they're standing on the side smoking and having a break, or eating lunch, or coming in and getting ready, or at the end of the day cleaning their trucks. We take our equipment, which we need to do the job. We need to take that equipment and then turn it into a tangible cost that we could sell and pass through in our service. We then take those together to build a high-level price that we set as a target to make sure that along the way of the ebbs and flows of business, where we sometimes sell at a good price and sometimes sell at a bad price, but we can see this minimum daily rate averaging out, giving us the confidence that we know that at a minimum, there's going to be 60% left over for the business and for profits. And that's how we work backwards based off of our costs to make sure that we have this framework to build in and guarantee our profits. Now, when we talk about guaranteeing our profits, that's where the simulation comes in over here, because this is a little calculator that you can use to guess and check based off of your costs and your margin and your equipment. Are these numbers doable? How much profit is left over, etc.? But in order to do this, we need to sneak in a number over here of our estimated annual overhead. And that's office salaries and rent and softwares and all of your annual expenses that are not tied directly to the crew going out. It could also include your salary, but it does not include crew labor or any equipment loans or equipment costs. So the way that it works after we input that number is that it takes the minimum daily rate that we're trying to produce up here, and it multiplies it by the approximate days that we work in a year to say that we now need to hit this amount of annual revenue to make that minimum daily rate work, to make sure we have all those expenses left over. This is what we expect to see in our business. Then we expect to see this amount of it left over in gross profit. After I've punched in my overhead for the business, I know that this amount of profit is going to be left over in the business. Now, this is dynamic. This is where you can go back up to the beginning and say, all right, you know what? Maybe $1 million with that crew isn't something I feel like my crew can do or my market can do. And maybe really my gross profit margin is going to be 50%. Once we update that, we can then scroll through again and see, all right, well, is that sustainable for my business? What do my profits look like? What do my costs look like? Is there anything left for me? And this gives us the ability to think from a new perspective. Well, I've been doing it this way, but is this way working? And this tool now is able to give us the confidence to think that through and make sure that we're not leaving money on the table, that we're actually building wealth for all of the effort we're going through in growing our business. Now we see that, you know what, maybe there's not that much profit left. So perhaps we do need to get to this 60% gross profit. And then we now have a framework for what we need to work towards on our pricing to make sure that we can get our daily rate up and up and up. And this is the pricing calculator to help you set a framework for profit in the pocket, wealth building, proper pricing, eliminating unknowns and fears and wondering if I should buy a certain piece of equipment, can I hire another person, etc. Thank you for downloading this. I hope that it helped shed some light onto that process, and looking forward to connecting in the future with any questions you may have. Thank you.